In just a few months, I'm going to be turning 31. And as I think back to my younger years, to my late teens, into my 20s, I realized that there's a lot of things that, whether or not I realized it at the time, I did right. But there are even more things that I did wrong. I think about a lot of things that I wish I had done differently back then, and things that if I had done them differently, I probably would have been in a better spot today. So this video is going to be for my younger viewers, for all of you guys who are in your 20s or coming up on your 20s, but equally for all of us who are a little bit past that point. For those of us who are older, these things are equally applicable. These are 5 things that if you can do these things when you're young, you'll be so much further ahead as a result when you do get older. But if you haven't done those things yet and you're already past that stage in your life, that's totally okay. You can start doing these things today to help get yourself ahead. Let's get right to it. So the very first thing we're going to talk about is something that I think is very important and very impactful no matter how old you are, but especially when you're young, and that is to keep your expenses low. This is particularly important with the 3 biggest spend categories for most people, which are housing, transportation, and food, specifically in that order. The less you can spend on those 3 things, the more money you theoretically can save and ultimately invest. And particularly when you're in your 20s, that is the most important decade of your life where compounding growth is concerned. The earlier on you can start investing, the more time your investments will have to grow and the more money they will generate. $1,000 invested at the age of 20 at an average 7% return will be worth over $16,000 by the time that you're 60 years old. But that same $1,000, if you invest it at 40 years old rather than 20 years old, will only be worth about $4,000 when you hit 60. And that's all because of compound growth. That's because the longer that your money sits in an investment, the more it grows. And especially when we're talking about larger sums of money, when we're talking about you consistently investing over your lifespan in your 20s, in your 30s, in your 40s, that can make the difference of hundreds of thousands of dollars that you have accessible at retirement. Personally, one of the best decisions I ever made, at least from a financial perspective, was staying living at home till I was 26. It wasn't always fun, it definitely wasn't always easy, and there were absolutely some downsides to it. But by staying at home till 26, I was able to keep my living costs quite a bit lower than I would have had I been living on my own, and that allowed me to save up a bunch of money, which ultimately became a $100,000 down payment on my first home that I ever bought. Even if that hadn't been an option for me, I could have more or less got to the same place by renting with a couple roommates, but ultimately just doing what I could to keep my living costs as low as possible allowed me to save up a lot more money than I otherwise would have, even when I wasn't making a lot of money to begin with, and allowed me to get much further ahead in life. As far as transportation was concerned, I drove a really old car. The thing cost me like $4,000. It lasted for 5 years, and it certainly wasn't fancy, but it did the trick just fine. And had I not actually needed a car to get to and from work, I probably would not have had one at all. The point that I'm trying to make here above all else is to do what you can as much as possible to avoid debt when you're young. That compound growth we just talked about with our investments, it also applies to debt. So if you're spending money you don't have, rather than your money growing rapidly, the debt you have is going to accumulate rapidly and it can sink you. Keep your living expenses as low as possible, stay out of debt, save as much money as you can, invest that money as early as possible, and then don't touch it. If you can follow that simple model, you're going to be a millionaire by the time you retire. That's really all you have to do. Stay out of debt, invest a lot, don't touch that money, rinse and repeat. The second thing you should start doing when you're young, if you want to get ahead in life, is to start building the healthy habits and routines that align with your long-term goals. I know that I've talked about this in other videos in the past, but I think that it is so important to set specific goals. Vague platitudes, saying things like, I want to make a lot of money, or I want to be healthy, or I want to live in a nice place. Those are not specific goals. In fact, they're not specific anything. They're just kind of sayings. They're cliches. Setting specific goals doesn't mean you can't pivot and change your mind along the way, but it does mean you have a starting point to start to build a plan to actually get you there. More specifically, by knowing exactly where it is you want to go and what route you have to take to get there, you can start building the habits that are going to help support that idea. Deep set habits are often very difficult to change, and specifically the habits we start when we're young can often make or break us when we get older. I know so many people who feel such immense regret for some of the choices they made when they're in their 20s. Everything from wasting money on like expensive shopping sprees or going out to clubs or going on too many vacations that they couldn't afford, to picking up nasty habits like smoking or doing drugs, or sometimes even just the time and money that was spent on a degree that they ultimately didn't finish or don't even use now. In my opinion, the reason that those things happen along the way is because people don't have a specific goal in mind. They don't have a specific target that they're working towards, and so they just kind of wander around aimlessly doing whatever feels good in the moment without considering the long-term consequences. And that's not to say that I haven't made mistakes along the way, because I definitely have, probably a lot of them to be honest, and I still do today because we all do. That's part of being human. But I'm a big believer in the idea of when you know better, you do better. And so while the best time to start a habit may have passed already, the second best time is right now. And one of the many tools that can help you to do just that is today's video sponsor, Greatness. Greatness is a lifestyle management app designed to help you build healthy habits and routines that you can actually stick to so you can live your best life. physically, mentally, emotionally, and financially. Whether you're trying to drink more water and go to bed a little earlier like I am, or you're trying to get your finances in order, eat healthier, whatever it is you're trying to accomplish, Greatness can help you reach your goals. Way more than just another habit tracking app, Greatness has built-in programs and courses for pretty much everything, which have been designed by behavioral science experts that can help keep you accountable and motivated every day. There are programs available for pretty much everything, from how to keep your home clutter-free, to how to manage your finances for early retirement, how to build healthier relationships, how to improve your self-confidence in social settings, anything you want. I'm currently doing the program called Sleeping Tight, which is helping to keep me on track with my sleep hygiene and bedtime routine, using a step-by-step plan that makes it easy to stay motivated and consistent. And honestly, so far, I've been doing pretty good. If you'd like to check out the Greatness app, head over to greatnessapp.org/accordingtonicole to get 72% off your 12-month membership, plus use the code Nicole10 at checkout to save an extra 10%. Thank you very much to Greatness for sponsoring this video. If you're currently in your 20s and you want to be able to get ahead later on in life, the third thing you need to do is something you actually need to not do, and that is don't be fancy. The pressure to keep up with everyone around you exists everywhere in life, no matter how old you are. Social media has made it a lot worse, but I think that it is at a peak when you're in your 20s. It's so normal when you're young to feel like your status as a person is attached to the things that you own, and as you get older, you'll start to see that that's simply not true. Most of the things that are important to you today won't even exist or be relevant in 10 years from now, but the debt you can accumulate by trying to chase after them will crush you for decades to come. That fancy sports car you've been eyeing will soon be crushed into a worthless cube of metal that you'll have to pay to dispose of. The new iPhone you've been drooling over is going to be scratched up, bogged down, and outdated in like a year from now. Even all of the designer clothes that your friends are currently wearing, they're just fads, and they're going to be cringy and embarrassing in just a few years' time. For anybody who's older, anybody who might be my age or even a little older, do you guys remember Von Dutch hats and how big those were at the time? Any younger people probably don't know what I'm talking about. They're these like ugly trucker hats that I don't know why anybody wanted them, but when I was probably in like the 6th or 7th grade, they were the thing to have, and they were outrageously expensive, and nobody would be caught dead wearing one today. I remember being in like 6th grade maybe and wanting a pair of Fat Farm sneakers more than anything else in the world. I feel like I'm coming across like a dinosaur right now. I'm sure that any young people watching probably don't even know what Fat Farm is. I haven't heard that name in decades. I think that the guy on Shark Tank, the bald guy, I think that he owns that company. I also remember being in high school and all of the girls having these like gigantic Louis Vuitton purses that they were basically using like backpacks. They were massive and they were ridiculous looking. And the point is that nobody would be caught dead wearing any of these things today. But at the time, we spent hundreds and hundreds of dollars on them, and we just wanted them because everybody else had them.
I can't wait to see the look on Kyle's stupid face when he sees my iPad has more memory than his.
In most cases, having the newest, fanciest, trendiest version of everything is totally pointless. It's a losing game. The things that matter a lot to you today won't matter to you in a month or 6 months or a year or 5 years from now. And instead, you'll be drooling over something new at that point, and then the same thing will continue to happen. And you really only want these things because everybody else has them, and everybody else only wants them because you have them. And really, nobody actually wants them. You just don't want to feel like you have less than everybody else, but everybody else doesn't need to have them anyways. I think I'm rambling, but I think you get the point. Buy things that are timeless, buy things that are durable and long-lasting, buy things that are actually going to add value to your life, and most importantly, buy things you can actually afford.
Mom, do not screw me over again! If I take that thing to school, everyone's gonna think I'm a poverty-stricken asshole!
Number 4 on this list is another one that I think is really important when you're young, but really important in general in life, and that's to surround yourself with good people. There's a saying that goes, you are the average of the 5 people you spend the most time around, and I think that even if you're not cognitively aware of it, it's true. I've often found myself repeating mannerisms or sayings or phrases of the people that I spend the most time with, even if I don't actually want to or mean to. The way that people act around you, the way that people talk around you, the things they talk about will subconsciously infiltrate your brain and will affect the way you see yourself and the world around you. If you surround yourself with people who have similar goals to you, people who want to achieve the same things you want to achieve, who are equally motivated or even more motivated than you, and more specifically, people who want to see you win, those wins will come a lot easier. On the flip side, if you surround yourself with people who are lazy and unmotivated, who are constantly negative, who think that they're a victim in every situation, they're just going to drag you down because you're going to start believing those things about yourself, even if it's not actually objectively true. Now, to be totally clear, I have friends who live very different lifestyles than I do, who have very different goals than I have, and who see the world very differently than I do. And that's totally fine. Doesn't mean we can't be friends, but it means I have to keep in mind the type of relationship I'm going to have with that person. I have certain friends who I know are going to hold me accountable and motivate me and cheer on my wins, and I do the same for them. Whereas I have other friends who I know that our relationship is just based off of jokes and giggles and nothing too serious, and that's okay, but that's all I'm going to get from that relationship.
Ow. 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 Ow.
I also know that I have certain friends who are struggling with certain things and who are going to come across more negative, and I can approach that relationship with compassion and empathy and try to help motivate them, but can't necessarily expect that in return, and that's totally fine too. I don't like this mindset that people get into, especially when it comes to business and self-development, of cutting out people who don't see eye to eye with you. I think it's very easy for life to become an echo chamber and for that to become like a really huge ego thing where you think you're better than everybody else, and newsflash, you're not better than anybody else. So don't cut out the friends just because they're different than you, but do try to find yourself a social group that will help to uplift you to where you want to be. And finally, number 5 is one we can't miss, and that is to just have fun, because you are young and ultimately you're only young once. Have fun, do so responsibly, but don't hold back too much. If you are going to make mistakes, which let's face it, you're going to, I do, you do, everybody does, it's better to make them when you're young, not only because it's more socially acceptable, but because you have more time to recover from them. You're gonna do embarrassing things when you're young, and people are gonna kind of roll their eyes and shrug because, hey, you're young, it happens. But those same things will be much less acceptable when you're 30 or 40 or 50. Similarly, if you make bad financial decisions when you're young, as long as you recognize them and you can stop them there, you still have plenty of time to catch up and fix your mistakes. You have a long career ahead of you still, and you'll always make more money. As long as, again, you recognize that and you don't kind of dive deeper into it, that is. But the truth is that, when you're young, you can't be too uptight. And this is something that honestly, I do have regrets about. I know I mentioned earlier in this video about people having regrets from overspending when they were young or making careless decisions. And that's very true, but I think the flip side also occurs, and I think that's something that I personally struggled with, which was being too uptight when I was young, not spending a little bit more money, not being a little bit more easygoing. I had a very specific goal in mind. For me, it was that I wanted to buy a house, and I couldn't really allow myself to deviate from that goal at all, and ultimately, I did it, but I do wish I had been a little bit less uptight with myself. I wish I had allowed myself to spend a little bit more money, to do a little bit more dumb things. You know what, you're only young once, so be responsible. Don't do anything that's gonna permanently ruin your life, but you know what, don't forget to have fun along the way. If you're currently watching this video and you're in your 20s, drop me a comment down below and let me know which of these points resonates the most with you. And if you're older, as I am, if this point in your life has already passed, let me know below what you would have told yourself if you could go back to being 20 or 21 years old. What would you have told your 21-year-old self now that you have the information that you do? If you enjoyed this video at all, please go ahead, hit that like button. Feel free to subscribe if you haven't done so yet. Trying to get to 25,000 subscribers. Thank you guys very much. I know we're getting very close. You can follow me on Instagram at according_to_Nicole. You can check me out on Patreon at patreon.com/accordingtonicole for additional content. Other than that, thank you guys so much as always for watching. Take care. I'll see you next week.